build alligator moats. He's proposed bombing Mexico. He's actually said we should shoot migrants in the legs and maybe even electrify the fence. These are cruel and ridiculous ideas, that they are proposals of Donald Trump and the MAGA right. This extreme political stunt should fail, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. A gentleman from Mississippi Reserve. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank my colleague, the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, and I respect my colleagues across the aisle who have voiced their opposition. It's important that we clarify the legacy that some of us would condemn by impeaching the secretary responsible for this legacy, and by contrast, the legacy that my colleagues who oppose the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas would support. 300,000 Americans dead from cartel drugs. 100,000 teenage girls and boys missing, lost by the Mayorkas system into the unspeakable horror of sex slavery networks across the filthiest corners of criminal organizations in our cities. American sovereignty disintegrated. American soil lost to cartel human and drug trafficking bases. Millions of single military-age men from over 100 countries, unvetted, released into our country, creeping into every corner of American society, every city, every town. Our schools overrun by illegals, granted free access to American education infrastructure in hundreds of reports, with no room left for our own children. Hundreds of thousands of violent criminals released into our nation, despite federal law stating that DHS shall detain known criminals who enter America illegally. 1,000 or more known or suspected terrorists allowed to pass freely into the heart of our nation, into my state, into yours. This is the legacy of Alejandro Mayorkas, and by our oath, we must impeach this man who has presented an arrogant, defiant tone of denial and lies to Congress for 3 years, seemingly content or even proud to destroy America day by day. So it is that on this day, it shall be written in the historical record of the People's House that Secretary of Department of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas has been impeached. So shall it be written. So shall it be done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Tennessee reserves. The gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my Republican colleagues are starving DHS of necessary border security resources while accusing Secretary Mayorkas of not doing his job. House Republicans refuse to consider the White House's $13.6 billion border supplemental funding request that would pay for more border agents and officers and detention beds. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Jayapal.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this resolution to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. This resolution is as ridiculous as it is dangerous. It has no evidence of high crimes or misdemeanors. Are we really debating impeaching a cabinet secretary because House Republicans don't like the policies that he advances under a democratically elected president? Far from alleging true high crimes and misdemeanors, this resolution relies on the same tired and untrue Republican talking points that Democrats have demonstrated for months are not true. With this Marjorie Taylor Greene sham impeachment resolution, the majority is bending to the will of the most extreme members of their conference simply because they don't like the policies that Secretary Mayorkas is pursuing. Secretary Mayorkas is an excellent and dedicated public servant working tirelessly to protect our national security and to address a broken immigration system. And this Republican Congress, the least productive Congress in the history of the United States, having passed only 27 bills that have been signed into law despite over 700 votes in this body, is simply trying to distract the American people from the fact that they are not doing a single thing to address the lives of ordinary Americans across this country. I keep thinking that the House cannot debase itself further, Mr. Speaker, but it appears that we have not reached rock bottom yet. Vote no on this sham of an impeachment. I yield back.
Yields back. Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now recognize the gentleman from Arizona for 2 minutes, Mr. Siscomani.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Chairman Green, for yielding me time. Let me start with this. The House is pursuing impeachment because there is no option left. Secretary Mayorkas has abandoned his job, and he has abandoned the American people. As the charges describe, the Secretary has willfully and systematically refused to comply with the law, and he's put our communities and our country at risk by doing so. This is not an action we take lightly. The last time his cabinet secretary was impeached was in 1876. This is a historic impeachment for someone with historic failures. The time has ran out for Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to be able to do his job. In order to secure our communities, protect our homeland, and keep Americans safe, Secretary Mayorkas has got to go. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to include in the record op-eds from frequent conservative legal commentator Jonathan Turley and Alan Dershowitz opposing the Mayorkas impeachment despite their policy disagreements with the Biden administration. I also include in the record a January 30th, 2024 editorial by the conservative Wall Street Journal titled "Impeaching Mayorkas Achieves Nothing."
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve balance.
Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I recognize the gentleman from California for 2 minutes, Mr. Issa.
The distinguished gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is so frustrating because today we are, in fact, impeaching a pawn. We're impeaching a pawn for the president. The secretary is being impeached for what he did wrong. He is, in fact, guilty as alleged. But in fact, he is just part of the high crimes and misdemeanor of the President of the United States. It was the President's decision to, in fact, undo policies that were working, to reverse, to make a systematic change that in my district, with over 55 miles of Mexican border, my border agents are reduced to being Uber drivers for everyone coming over the border. I am perfectly willing to listen to people say, well, this is a policy difference, but it is not. To faithfully execute the mission, you can have differences in how to do it. To thwart the very execution of that mission, which Secretary Mayorkas has done, is in fact an impeachable offense. I have some sympathy for him because I believe he is just obeying the orders of his boss. But that has been said before. That excuse has been used. The fact is he took an oath. He must faithfully execute that oath. If he cannot, because the president will not let him do it, then he needs to resign. As we impeach the first cabinet officer in well over 100 years, the fact is he should have resigned rather than to do things which were adverse to the Constitution, adverse to his oath, but upon the orders and duty of the president. The president can be wrong. The president can order high crimes and misdemeanors. The president can be guilty of them. This president is, in fact, guilty of that which we are impeaching the secretary for today, but so is the Secretary, and for that reason, I urge a yes vote and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire about how much time remains for each side?
Gentleman from Tennessee has 22 and a half minutes. Gentleman from Mississippi has 24. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, this baseless sham impeachment fails to articulate a single charge that rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors. The constitutional standard for impeachment. Mere policy differences do not amount to impeachable offenses. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record a letter by eminent constitutional scholars opposed to this political stunt, as well as a Washington Post op-ed by Joshua Metz and Norm Eisen titled, "Why Impeaching Mayorkas Would Violate the Constitution."
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance
Gentleman
of my time.
reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I now recognize for 2 minutes, or I yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Oklahoma, Mrs. Pice.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier in this debate, the gentleman from Mississippi noted that there has been more fentanyl seized at our southern border than ever before. But what he did not also recognize is that there are now more fentanyl deaths in this country than ever before. And that is a direct result of what is happening across our southern border. I rise today in support of the impeachment of Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. This is one of the most solemn and consequential actions the United States House of Representatives can take, and I do not take it lightly. However, under the watch of Secretary Mayorkas, we have witnessed the degradation of our border security and the willful and consistent refusal to comply with and enforce federal immigration laws. Today, fentanyl is the leading cause of death for those ages 18 to 45. Terrorists on the FBI watch list are being released into the interior of the country, and the cartels are a multi-billion-dollar business. The crisis we face today is a threat to every single American, causing our communities to be less safe, and it is a direct result of Secretary Mayorkas' actions. A clear message must be sent to the executive branch that they no longer get to break the law without consequences. Secretary Mayorkas must be held accountable. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield.
Gentlelady yields back.
Reserve.
Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, today 3 bipartisan former secretaries of Homeland Security wrote to Speaker Johnson voicing their opposition to impeaching Secretary Mayorkas. They agree that impeachment for a policy is not constitutionally permissible. They further warned that allowing impeachment of cabinet officials over policy differences would jeopardize our national security. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record the letter from Secretaries Chertoff, Napolitano, and Johnson.
Without objection.
And yielding 2 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Goldman.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my friend, the ranking member, for yielding. I rise today to condemn this rushed, baseless, sham impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas that will go down in history as one of Congress's darkest moments. The Republican argument for impeachment boils down to their view that Secretary Mayorkas has intentionally caused the influx of immigrants over our southern border. Never mind that even if true, this is not a high crime or misdemeanor that has ever been used before in the history of our country. Never mind that no court has found the Secretary or the Department of Homeland Security to have violated the law. And in fact, the United States versus Texas case, which my friends on the other side of the aisle like to cite so frequently, actually reversed a district court ruling and held that there must be discretion given to the secretary as there has been given to every single department secretary for 27 years. And never mind that every one of those Department of Homeland Security secretaries has interpreted the law the exact same way that Secretary Mayorkas has. Never mind that Republicans have sued him to stop him from implementing the policy changes that the administration has tried to put in effect to address the situation at the border. Never mind that House Republicans are impeaching him for failing to address the problems at the border while he has spent months negotiating a bipartisan bill in the Senate to do just that. The reason for this partisan stunt is simple. Donald Trump and House Republicans want to use the border as an election year issue rather than actually solve the problems through necessary legislation. I urge my colleagues who care about the Constitution, the rule of law, and this institution to vote no. You will otherwise come to regret this vote.
Gentleman's time
And
has
I yield
expired.
back.
Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, General Bergman.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last Secretary of Homeland Security appointed by a Democrat president once described a border crisis as more than 1,000 Border Patrol encounters per day. In December last year, we averaged nearly 10 times that number. Perhaps most worryingly, 2023 saw a record-setting 860,000, just a little bit shy of 1 million gotaways, border crossers who were detected but who were never apprehended. That's nearly 1 million potential felons, cartel members, terrorists, and drug traffickers freely allowed into our country and currently residing in our communities and our neighborhoods. This crisis has been aided and abetted through the unprecedented dereliction of duty of Secretary Mayorkas. As the House Homeland Security Committee has uncovered, Mayorkas has repeatedly violated, subverted, and simply ignored multiple laws set forth by Congress that he swore an oath to uphold, all while ignoring court orders and lying to Congress and the American people. The evidence of his wrongdoings is damning. His abuse of power goes well beyond simple bureaucratic incompetence, and his actions, which have put our nation at extreme risk, cannot go unanswered. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Republicans are exploiting impeachment power to distract from their inability to pass legislation. Here's what Republican Representative Chip Roy said in November, quote, "I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one that I can go campaign on and say we did. One. Explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done." I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, the Democratic leader, Honorable Hakeem Jeffries.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Let me first just thank the distinguished gentleman from the great state of Mississippi for yielding, for his leadership, for his dignity, for his decency, for his continued defense of our democracy in the face of the extreme attacks coming from the other side of the aisle. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to this political stunt, this reckless Republican effort to impeach Secretary Mayorkas. Let's be clear, Secretary Mayorkas is a good man, a patriotic man, and a hardworking man doing the best he can under very difficult circumstances. That's not an impeachable offense. Extreme MAGA Republicans have produced no evidence that Secretary Mayorkas has engaged in a high crime or misdemeanor, no evidence that Secretary Mayorkas has engaged in an impeachable offense, and no evidence that Secretary Mayorkas has broken the law or violated the Constitution. Not a shred of evidence, not a scintilla of evidence, nothing but extreme MAGA Republican chaos and confusion, and the effort to avoid doing the hard work necessary to find common ground to actually address the challenges at the border. What do these impeachment articles have to do with the issue of addressing our broken immigration system? Nothing. What do these impeachment articles have to do with building a healthy economy for everyday Americans? Nothing. What do these impeachment articles have to do with addressing the inflationary challenges and the affordability issues that the American people are experiencing day after day as we work to continue to emerge from a once-in-a-century pandemic that shut down the economy? Absolutely nothing. Extreme MAGA Republicans have spent this entire Congress not advancing any ideas, acting on any agenda, deciding to work together with us to solve problems for the American people. And so you've brought articles of impeachment that are not anchored in reality. You've brought articles of impeachment for one simple reason: because you really want to impeach Joe Biden. That's what you were directed to do by the puppet master, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. You really want to impeach Joe Biden, but you realize that that is politically unpopular. And so you've brilliantly come up with, in your minds, Plan B. Let's go after Secretary Mayorkas. No evidence that he's engaged in wrongdoing, committed a crime, or violated the Constitution, but let's go after Secretary Mayorkas. Maybe that will satisfy the quest for revenge of the puppet master. Because when the puppet master, Donald Trump, says jump, extreme MAGA Republicans respond, how high? We just got evidence of that over the last few weeks, because extreme MAGA Republicans have been lecturing America that we have to deal with the challenges at the border. We agree. A bipartisan process has been underway in the Senate for months to try to fix our broken immigration system. But as soon as Donald Trump says, no, we actually don't want to do anything about the challenges at the border, because politically that might not be good for us, you've walked away from working together in a common sense fashion to fix our broken immigration system. And so instead, what you have to offer the American people is this sham impeachment, this political stunt, this waste of time. But you will not fool the American people. You will actually be held accountable for your inaction and your affirmative leaning in to doing things that don't advance progress in any way, shape, or form for the American people. No reasonable American can conclude that you're making life better for them with this sham impeachment. But you will live with this like a scarlet letter. It may succeed, it may not. Secretary Mayorkas should wear this like a badge of honor, because it's worthless. It means nothing. It's fake, it's fraudulent, and it's foolish. And I urge everybody to vote no so we can get back to doing the real business of the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair. The gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from North Carolina, Chairwoman Fox.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman from Tennessee for yielding and his great work on this impeachment resolution. Mr. Speaker, Secretary Mayorkas' political career is on the chopping block where it rightfully belongs. He has failed to apply the laws that would stop this invasion at the southern border. To those who claim that this impeachment is for purely political purposes, you're dead wrong. This is about upholding the rule of law that governs our republic, the same rule of law that Secretary Mayorkas has ignored and forsaken every day. Secretary Mayorkas has had innumerable opportunities to enforce the laws that are already on the books, but has chosen not to. He has earned his own impeachment. Let's be clear. Our entire constitutional system is predicated on the idea that Congress creates laws and the executive branch enforces those laws. Allowing this abuse of our constitutional system to go unchecked could spell the beginning of the end for our republic. I'm proud to serve as a co-sponsor of these impeachment articles. The rule of law must be restored at the border immediately. And with that, I yield back my time to the gentleman from Tennessee.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Republicans use the language of invasion and great replacement theory. But look, invasion in the Constitution means invasion during an act of war by a foreign nation or insurrection from within. I direct my Republican colleagues to the Federalist Paper number 4 and 43 if they want to learn why the entry of migrants escaping crisis for a better life is not invasion. I now yield. I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Chairman Arrington.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank our fearless leader and good gentleman from Tennessee, and just a comment about this not being an invasion. No honest or objective American from sea to shining sea could characterize what's happening at our southern border in any way other than an invasion. And it's destroying our country. And it's because of the willful neglect. It's because of the dereliction of duty. It's because of the faithlessness to this Constitution and its first job to provide a common defense. I want to thank Chairman Green for restoring the dignity and integrity of the impeachment process. I think it's important that we are careful, that we make the fullness of due process an important feature, restoring what's happened over the last 2 impeachments. This is a year-long process, and I appreciate your fidelity to the Constitution and the integrity of this institution. Look, bottom line, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the impeachment clause in the Constitution, according to our founders, was to give remedy for this very circumstance, to remove someone who had violated their public trust in a way that resulted in serious and systemic injury to society. So, Chairman Green, again, thank you for your leadership. I stand with you. This is the right and responsible thing to do in faithfulness to the Constitution, in the protection of the American people, and in defense of the sovereignty of the greatest nation in human history. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, the extreme mega Republican stunt to impeach Secretary Mayorkas is baseless. The Democratic staff of the Committee on Homeland Security thoroughly documented the many failures of fact and law in the articles of impeachment contained in H Resolution 868. I ask unanimous consent that it be included in the record.
Without objection.
I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the distinguished gentleman. In the time that we've had to debate one of the most sacred and deliberative responsibilities of the United States Congress, and that is impeachment proceedings, there has been not one iota of truth and or facts that would suggest that Secretary Mayorkas is in fact guilty of the articles of impeachment against him. One, the willful violation of the law, and the benefit to himself from anything that he might have done or that he did not do. But what it has done is given to this nation, a nation of laws and a nation of immigrants, the sense that you cannot flee Nazism, you cannot flee Cuba, and for more than 2 decades come to this country to serve your beloved adopted country, that you cannot be the Justice Department U.S. Attorney, you cannot be a Deputy Secretary, and now the Secretary of Homeland Security, without those who find it strange to have you with your diversity to be able to lead in this way. This is a question of stunts over solutions, and the Constitution was created to create a more perfect order, and that is that under that Constitution, precious rights fall under the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, due process. Let me say, Mr. Speaker, that this Secretary of Homeland Security was not allowed to bring his own witnesses. The majority did not allow the minority to have its day of witnesses. There were no constitutional scholars who pointed to the fact in large numbers, as they would have, that this is in fact a fraud, and it is fraught with misrepresentations. Operational control is 0 people crossing the border. That means they're not crossing for entertainment, they're not crossing for business, they are just there. This is wrong, this is wrong-headed, this is a stunt, and this does not bequeath or equal to the Constitution, which is to create a more perfect union.
Expired.
Vote against these articles of impeachment. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from Mississippi reserved. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Montana, Mr. Zinke.
Gentleman from Montana is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of House Resolution 863, the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas. You know, Montana is about the same size as from here to Chicago plus 2 miles. It's a long, long border. And the few border people we have generally are deployed down south. So my friend and gentleman from New York said, what evidence do we offer? What evidence of negligence? What evidence of wrongdoing? I'd say it's pretty easy to find. It's found in every street, every city, every county, every state across this nation. The evidence is found in every fentanyl pill and death. The evidence is found in every woman that's raped along our border. The evidence is found in every child trafficking case that is in every city, to include Billings, Missoula, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. It's found in every evidence of children being sex trafficked. And I can go on. The evidence of negligence is the willful and blind turning of this horror that we have in our southern border. Our northern border, while not discussed a lot, is wide open, because this country doesn't have a border. And in Montana, this administration can't even prevent a balloon. So the evidence is clear, compelling, and not in dispute. The lack of action and blindfold and willingness to do nothing is deserving no less than impeachment. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Secretary Mayorkas is doing his job with the resources allotted by this Congress. Not only has no administration detained all border crossers, but Congress has never appropriated sufficient resources to detain all individuals who should be detained under the Republicans' reading of the law. I now yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Castro.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Chairman. This impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas is a sham. The process was a sham. The charges are a sham. And you might wonder, if that's the case, then why go through all of this trouble? Well, last November, a colleague of mine from the state of Texas stood up in this chamber and asked for one meaningful accomplishment that the Republican Congress has accomplished this session. The answer was nothing. That colleague was not a Democrat on this side of the aisle, but a Republican. A Republican who asked the question whether somebody could name one meaningful accomplishment. So the answer to my question, why does this happen, when you have no record of accomplishment to run on, nothing on education, nothing on health care, nothing about creating jobs, nothing on the environment, nothing about keeping people safe, this is what you do. You put on a circus. And that's why we're here today. If we need an example, let's look to the last few days. For years, Republicans have used immigrants as political scarecrows, using them like scarecrows to put up in the face of Americans and scare Americans that every single one of these people, including the 6-year-old children, is coming to harm you and hurt you. And because they have no positive policy solutions, man, they sell that really hard. You hear it on every radio interview, every television interview. You hear it from the people in here. You hear it on television, on Fox News, every single place. They use these people to scare Americans. That's how they want to win. And that's why we're here. Because there's nothing else left. And on the border,
Gentleman,
I would ask for
Additional 30 seconds.
gentleman recognized for additional 30 seconds.
They have claimed that we need to secure the border. But even when President Biden made the comment that he would be willing to shut down the border because it's overwhelmed, the Republican speaker says that that proposal that would allow for it, what they've been asking for supposedly for years, they say it's dead on arrival. They're not going to do it. This is a show trial. It's a sham. I yield back, Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Ezell.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, before coming to Congress, I spent 8 years as a sheriff in my home county and 42 years as a law enforcement officer. If I hadn't have done my job as a sheriff, I would have been fired and removed from office. Mr. Speaker, Secretary Mayorkas has not done his job. He has willfully ignored immigration laws passed by Congress and allowed our southern border to turn into utter chaos. His breach of the public trust cannot go unanswered. I voted to hold him accountable in committee last week, and I will do so today on the floor. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this impeachment and hold Secretary Mayorkas accountable for his actions. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee reserves.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Barragan.
The gentlelady from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson. I rise to oppose this baseless, politically driven impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas by extreme MAGA Republicans. House Republicans have failed to meet the constitutional standard for impeachment. They have failed to provide evidence for high crimes and misdemeanors because no evidence exists. Republicans rant about challenges at the southern border, and their only solution is to remove the person who has been in the room trying to work on a bipartisan basis to get tough on border policies that I don't even agree with. Republicans are not serious about border security. This is all about politics for them. They have consistently opposed legislation to increase funding for more Border Patrol agents at the southern border, more Customs and Border Protection, more money to combat fentanyl from coming across the southern border, something they love to talk about, but they want to put no resources to make sure that it's not coming over. And of course, they've even said no to $1 billion in ICE detention beds. This is a Republican talking point, and they have said no to this too. So why are we wasting floor time on political games with a fact-free impeachment resolution instead of legislation to improve the lives of Americans? Because House Republicans can't govern. They want to distract from their weekly embarrassments. Their own members admit they have not accomplished anything. This sham impeachment is not an accomplishment. It's just another embarrassment because they are a do-nothing Congress. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, can I inquire as to how much time remains for each side?
Gentleman from Tennessee has 12 minutes, 12 and a half. Gentleman from Mississippi has 12.
I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
I'd like to address some of the, at a minimum, misinformation that's been provided by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. This notion that Republicans have somehow cut Border Patrol is absolutely false. In fact, it's been the administration that's brought decreasing budget requests, for example, for ICE detention beds every single year, and we've wound up giving them more than they've asked for. Our bill, H.R. 2, House Resolution 2, actually would provide 3,000 new Border Patrol agents, and the supplemental request by the president's like 1,400. I mean, you can't say we're resourcing less when we're actually providing numbers for more. I mean, that's just disinformation. It's false. This notion that seizures are up, I mean, if you pour more water through a small pipe, you're going to catch them. If there's more volume coming at the fence, they're going to seize more. I get that. But tell me why the price of fentanyl in Tennessee for a hit of it on the street went from $95 a hit when this president took office to $28 a hit. It's because the supply and demand of fentanyl. It's, supply and demand curve. And that's because it's pouring across our southern border. It's pouring across our southern border because the cartels are jamming folks through the crossing sites. The Border Patrol agents are having to move off the border to cover that, and we have a wide open southern border. We've shown this in our 5 phases investigation, videos of, camouflage wearing, carpet shoe wearing people with backpacks full of drugs coming through the remote parts of the country, or the border. It's to suggest that just because seizures are up, somebody's doing their job, that's meaningless. I want to make a point here because several people have said if we were concerned about border protection, we would bring up the Senate negotiated bill. Well, I thought they had to pass it over there before we could bring it up. I thought you had to actually pass. I haven't heard that the bill's even passed the Senate. So this accusation that we somehow aren't for Border Patrol because we haven't taken up this bill is false, because it hasn't even passed the Senate yet. I heard someone say Mr. Mayorkas has done his job. I mean, the last poll I saw was like 85% of Americans think the guy is failing. But yeah, keep singing that song. Rushed, we've been at this for almost a year. One gentleman said no court has actually ruled that Mr. Mayorkas is breaking the law. The Fifth Circuit Court absolutely ruled it. And then the gentleman who mentioned that actually said that the Supreme Court overturned that. No, they didn't. They decided they weren't going to decide. They said, we don't have standing here, or you don't have standing here. So the case wasn't technically even heard. They said, you don't have standing, have a nice day. To suggest that that was overturned, the Fifth Circuit Court's ruling on the lawlessness of this secretary is just wrong. It's wrong. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Guest.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to push back. I want to tell you that what is happening here is not political theater, as my friends on the other side of the aisle wish to make this. The Democrats have sought to blame Republicans, saying that our inaction has helped cause this border crisis. But I will tell you that nothing is further from the truth. Almost a year ago, this body passed H.R. 2, a border security bill. A border security bill that would fund a record number of Customs and Border Patrol agents. A bill which would give raises to those men and women who are there on the front lines trying to secure our border. A bill which would invest in technology to stop the flow of illegal drugs coming across our borders. A bill which would have restarted wall construction. That bill for almost a year has sat in the other chamber, has sat in the Senate. And Schumer has refused to bring that bill to the floor. This body also passed the Homeland Security Appropriations Bill, giving the Homeland Security Department more money than that department has ever received. We funded those additional agents. We funded those pay raises. We funded additional detention beds. And what has happened to that appropriations bill? It also sits in the Senate, waiting for the Senate to take action. And today, my friends across the aisle, they seek to hide behind this Senate bill that was crafted behind closed doors in the cover of darkness. A bill that did not include any from the House of Representatives, did not include Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green, ranking member from Mississippi, Benny Thompson. The Senate, 3 senators out of 100 got together behind closed doors, and for weeks they sat down and they crafted a bill.
Another minute.
Gentleman's recognized for additional minute.
And that bill, with no input on behalf of the House of Representatives, we are now supposed to adopt that bill before it even passes the Senate. I want to give you a number, Mr. Speaker. That number is 370,000. That is the number of immigrants who came into our country last month alone. That's not a year. That's not 6 months. That is a single month, $370,000. Yet our Homeland Security Secretary continues to maintain that the border is secure. And my friends across the aisle seek to blame Republicans for this crisis. I will tell you that their blame is misplaced. If they want to know the blame and they want to blame someone for what's happening on the southwest border, they need to look in the mirror. They need to look at what their secretary has done, and they need to look at what their president has done. They can no longer blame Republicans for their failures. And I will close with this, Mr. Speaker. If we are unable to hold Secretary Mayorkas accountable for his failures, for his failure to enforce the law,
Gentleman's time has expired.
we can hold no one accountable. Secretary Mayorkas must be impeached.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the administration is enforcing the law. ICE is currently detaining over 38,000 people. This is 4,000 more than Congress has provided funding for. If Republicans want DHS to detain more people, they should provide the funds the administration has asked for in the supplemental request. Under former President Trump, Republicans cheered the doubling of drug seizures. Now they view it as a problem. This is hypocrisy at its finest. Under Secretary Mayorkas' leadership, DHS has seized more fentanyl and arrested more criminals for fentanyl-related crimes in the last 2 years than in the previous 5 years. Mr. Speaker, this impeachment has been a pre-planned political stunt from the beginning. I request unanimous consent to include in the record a New York Times article detailing how Secretary of Homeland Security, I request unanimous consent to include in the record a New York Times article detailing how Homeland Security Committee Chairman Mark Green promised donors that the House would impeach Secretary Mayorkas prior to launching any type of inquiry. Get the popcorn, he said.
Without objection. Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would yield to myself as much time as I'd consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I think that most of my colleagues here and a lot of people back home certainly know that I had the unbelievable privilege to interview Saddam Hussein on the night of his capture. And as I was sitting there talking to Saddam Hussein, I asked him why he invaded Kuwait, and he gave me all these justifications about who owned which oil field. And then he held up the palm of his hand, and he pointed to the palm of his hand, and he said, you know, all of human civilization comes from the Tigris and Euphrates River. Every person on the planet is an Iraqi, and I'm the president of Iraq. What Saddam was saying is he was the king of the world. The thought struck me, how does a person get there? Well, the old adage came to mind that, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you concentrate power into the hands of fewer and fewer people, you get tyranny every time. In this case, one man. Our founders were brilliant. They were following the philosophies of Montesquieu, and they decided that they would divide power out. They would separate 3 branches of government, and then with the 10th Amendment, they would separate power between the federal government and the states, the local governments. But they did develop 3 equal and separate branches of government, with the legislative branch writing the laws and the executive branch executing the laws. And interestingly enough, in the Iran-Contra hearing, the Democrats said in their report, you can't pick and choose which law you want to enforce. It's also fascinating that, you know, here we are. They say it's about policy. This is about a systemic, planned mechanism to undo the immigration laws passed before, just because the current secretary doesn't think that's what they ought to be. That secretary is supposed to execute those laws, but he's chosen not to. It says shall detain criminal felons, and he has directed his DHS employees not to do that, violating the laws passed by this body, telling this separate but equal branch of government, I don't care what you say or have passed as law. I don't care that you represent the voice of the American people. I'm the guy who knows the best way to do it, and I'm going to do it my way. That is the road to tyranny. That is power in one man's hands. And that is not what our Constitution says it's supposed to be. And he took an oath to that Constitution, to defend that Constitution that says this branch writes, that branch executes. He has violated his oath of office. He has subverted the laws that this body has passed and thus basically said, I don't care about the Congress. That is unacceptable. And whether he were a Republican or a Democrat, standing that way, I would be here today doing everything I could to remove him from office. Because when I was 17, I took an oath to that Constitution for the first time. And I served for 24 years willing to take a bullet for that Constitution and the people of this country. And I will not stand idly by while he throws it in the garbage. I reserve.
Gentleman from Tennessee reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, even some House Republicans have acknowledged that there's no constitutional basis for impeachment. Representative McClintock called this effort an unconstitutional abuse of power and reckless, partisan, and unserious. Representative Buck said, it's not an impeachable offense. This is a policy difference. Mr. Speaker, besides failing to articulate a single cognizable charge that would meet the constitutional impeachment standard of high crimes and misdemeanors, this sham impeachment has been marred by procedural failures. I ask unanimous consent to include in the record documentation of those procedural failures.
Without objection. Gentleman from Mississippi reserves. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and am prepared to close after the gentleman from Mississippi closes.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Mississippi is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no more speakers and I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time. Mr. Speaker, the statements from the other side this afternoon have misrepresented the facts and the laws of this baseless sham impeachment. This extreme mega Republican majority is more about stunts rather than solutions. This political stunt is about placating extreme elements within the Republican conference rather than doing what's right for America. Because it's clear that Republicans have failed to make the case for impeachment, they failed to articulate a single high crime and misdemeanor, the other side of the aisle reeks of desperation. Sadly, many Republicans appear willing to undermine the Constitution they claim to hold dear to score cheap political points. I'm holding out hope that some of my colleagues across the aisle will do the right thing, that they will join us in upholding the oath we all swore to the Constitution. I urge my colleagues to reject House Resolution 863. Vote no on this sham impeachment. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of my time to myself. As you've heard, the evidence against Secretary Mayorkas is compelling, but so too is the constitutional justification for impeachment. The constitutional history and the framers' intent are clear. We, the people's representatives, have no option but to exercise this duty when executive branch officials blatantly refuse to comply with the laws we have passed, threaten the separation of powers, imperil the constitutional order, and expose Americans to untold suffering and death. This historical record is unambiguous. From Madison to Hamilton, the framers uniformly believed that executive branch officials who failed to defend the Constitution and enforce the law should no longer hold office. We know that Secretary Mayorkas refused to comply with the law. We know that he lied to Congress and breached the public trust. We all witnessed the horrific consequences. But in closing, my question to my colleagues is this. If Secretary Mayorkas' brazen, blatant disregard for the laws we have passed is not enough to warrant action, why are we even here? What is the point of passing laws if we allow the executive branch to violate those laws with impunity? Do we care so little for our constitutional role and responsibilities that we would allow an official of either party to openly defy laws passed by this House, the people's House? I truly hope not. That would be a dangerous precedent and a serious abdication of our duty. Willfully violating the law to open America's borders to millions of unvetted migrants and breaching the public trust are grave offenses against our country, our Constitution, and our constituents. It is therefore incumbent upon us on this solemn day to fulfill our oaths to the Constitution and exercise the power to impeach. I urge my colleagues to join me. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Tennessee yields back. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 996, the previous question is ordered on the resolution as amended. Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of House Resolution 863 is postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on the motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or votes objected to under Clause 6 of Rule 20. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7217.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 7217, a bill making emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the attacks in Israel for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. Calvert, and the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mrs. DeLauro, will each control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on the measure under consideration.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to offer House Resolution 7217, the Israel Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. This bill provides $17.6 billion in emergency supplemental appropriations, which provide needed military assistance to America's great ally, Israel, and support U.S. military forces operating in the region. On October 7, 2023, Hamas carried out a brutal, unprovoked terrorist attack on the people of Israel. The horrific acts committed on this day resulted in 1,200 deaths, thousands injured, and 240 hostages. 136 remain in captivity, and over 30 are believed to be dead. The Israeli people are still reeling from the horrors of October 7th, but have bravely pushed their sorrow aside to root out and fight Hamas and ensure that the people are never threatened again. Last November, the House passed a $14.3 billion supplemental to shore up our ally. The bill included $5.2 billion in missile defense systems such as Iron Dome, David Sling, and Iron Beam, $4.4 billion to backfill U.S. stocks, $1 billion for U.S. munition production such as 155 rounds and small diameter bombs, $3.5 billion for foreign military financing of U.S. systems and munitions, and $200 million for the protection of U.S. personnel and emergency evacuations of American citizens in the region as a result of this conflict. These requirements remain unchanged and are aligned with the Biden administration's supplemental request and are included again in the bill we are considering today. Unfortunately, the situation in the Middle East has continued to deteriorate since November. The Houthis have launched dozens of missile, drone, and boat attacks on military and civil ships in the Red Sea. On January 28th, 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and 40 injured by a drone attack. 3 U.S. soldiers were killed and 40 injured in a drone attack at a military base in Jordan, caused by an Iranian-backed militia. Just this morning, the Houthis fired missiles at 2 civilian ships in Yemen, 1 British, 1 American. We're putting our military in an untenable situation, and attacks continue to escalate. Now we must shore up our ally Israel and provide our military with the resources they need to protect our troops in the region. The new funding in this bill addresses that changing reality by providing $3.3 billion for U.S. military operations in the region funded through December 24. This includes $1 billion for low-cost defensive capability to thwart future attacks on U.S. forces in the region. In many instances, we have been intercepting low-cost Iranian-backed drones with multi-million-dollar munitions. This funding will protect our forces and put us on the right side of the cost curve. This funding bill resupplies Israel's defensive capability, restores American defense industry to replenish our stocks, funds necessary operations for our forces in the region, and sends a strong signal that the United States will not back down. I'm grateful for the support of Chairwoman Granger, Chairman Diaz-Balart, Republican leadership, and dozens of members who have co-sponsored the bill. I'm also grateful for the support expressed by many of my friends across the aisle. We have an opportunity today to come together and send a strong message: the United States stands with Israel. I want to address the position of the Democratic leadership, including President Biden's veto threat. Assertion that this bill plays politics are patently false. Last November, Democrats said they wanted a clean bill. That's exactly what this is. This bill simply provides necessary resources to our closest ally in the region and our own military. I introduced this bill because it's the right thing to do. The only people making it political are those who oppose it. Tomorrow is the 4-month anniversary of the horrific October 7th terrorist attack, an act of war. Israel knows that we stand with them. And today we can send a clear message that we support the efforts to eradicate Hamas and the only way to truly bring peace to the region. Likewise, our American military men and women should know their government stands fully behind them and will respond to these numerous attacks. Terrorists and those supporting them should have no question of American resolve. I encourage all members to support the Israel Security Supplemental and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you. 122 days ago, Hamas terrorists murdered over 1,000 Israelis and at least 30 Americans in cold blood. They took hundreds hostage in the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. President Biden's supplemental funding request for Israel, Ukraine, the Indo-Pacific, and for our border has gone all but completely unanswered by this historic do-nothing majority. For months, our colleagues in the majority insisted that any foreign assistance bill must include border policy changes. So spoke Speaker Johnson at the White House several months ago and said we needed a bipartisan border security agreement that would open the door, unlock the door for funds for foreign assistance. Yet, Republicans have rejected a bipartisan bill that would accomplish exactly what they have asked for. While declaring that bill dead on arrival in the House, the majority has opted to consider a bill that we know the president will veto. This is a political stunt that makes it less likely that Israel gets its funds while endangering U.S. national security. This accomplishes nothing and delays aid getting out to our allies and providing humanitarian relief. Our allies cannot wait. Our border communities cannot wait. Our cities cannot wait. I wholeheartedly support funding for Israel. I have written aid to Israel supplemental appropriations over the last several years. However, I cannot support this bill, which falls dangerously short of what this moment calls for. Our allies are facing existential threats, and our friends and foes around the globe are watching, waiting to see how America will respond. Putin is watching, Xi is watching, the Ayatollah Khomeini is watching, Russia, China, and Iran are watching, and our allies are watching. This bill does not provide a penny in humanitarian assistance. We cannot abandon the innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of these conflicts, particularly in Gaza. The costs of Hamas's rule over Gaza and the war against Israel are borne by innocent Palestinians. Israel's harsh response has raised these costs further. Families, children are facing unthinkable circumstances, millions facing starvation because of this conflict. No one with clear eyes would say otherwise. Furthermore, if this bill were to become law, there is no path to support Ukraine. We are witnessing the first land war in Europe in a generation. And through inaction, this Congress risks handing a sovereign nation over to a ruthless autocrat, jeopardizing U.S. national security. Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine. If he overtakes Ukraine and moves against a NATO ally, we will see U.S. troops in a ground war. If we do not provide Ukraine with what they need, the ultimate legacy of the 118th Congress will be the appeasement of a dictator and the destruction of a free nation. Our allies and our enemies in Europe and around the globe will know that the United States is no longer a trusted partner in the security of the free world. Yet, we know that a supermajority of this body supports Ukraine. There are unquestionably more than 218 votes in the House for a supplemental appropriations that includes Israel, humanitarian assistance, Ukraine, and Indo-Pacific assistance. Yet, House Republicans are refusing to take that path. The Senate bill acts now to address the border that is in crisis. The status quo is unacceptable, but Republicans say no to moving forward. We should reject this unserious effort, this political ploy, and insist on a bipartisan product that supports our allies and protects the integrity of our border. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. And this is a bipartisan effort. This is a bipartisan bill. And with that, I yield to the gentlewoman from Texas, the chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Granger, for 3 minutes.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 7217, a bill that will provide additional support for Israel. And I want to thank Chairman Calvert for the leadership on his bill that he's given. Nearly 4 months ago, we watched Hamas brutally attack the Israeli people. Unfortunately, the situation in the region has only gotten worse. Israel and now U.S. forces have been attacked by terrorist groups backed by Iran. Funding is needed to address the growing threats we face. The bill before us provides a total of $17.6 billion in emergency resources. Specifically, the bill includes funding for Iron Dome, David Sling, Iron Beam defense system, and other weapons through the Foreign Military Financing Program. To ensure that U.S. support does not impact our own military readiness, the bill restocks the items we have already sent to Israel. It is also providing $3.3 billion to support our military operations in the region. Now, more than ever, we must stand firm with Israel. The bill sends a strong message that the United States supports our great ally. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the important bill. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentlewoman from Minnesota, the ranking member of the Defense Subcommittee, Ms. McCollum.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Ranking Member Delora. Mr. Speaker, our nation faces two immense national security challenges, and Congress must address them both. Russia's illegal and unjust invasion of Ukraine, which threatens their territorial integrity and the security of Europe, and Israel's response to the Hamas terrorist attacks on October 7th, which has spiraled into a regional conflict between the United States and Iranian proxies. Tragically, three U.S. service members have lost their lives in this conflict. Our nation and the world need decisive action from Congress. The Hamas attacks on October 7th were barbaric, and Israel does have the right to defend itself. And I've long supported missile defense priorities like Iron Dome in the defense appropriation bill. But this is not the way to get more aid to Israel. The Senate and the White House do not support this action. This bill was introduced to get ahead of the Senate's bipartisan security supplemental, which does address all of our national security priorities. The Republican House bill plays politics with our national security, and that's wrong. It's a non-starter for those of us who seriously want to address these crises in a comprehensive manner. And here's how we do that. We do provide assistance to Israel, but it's equally important to get more life-saving humanitarian aid into Gaza, because if we don't, the situation for civilians will continue to deteriorate. Starvation will grow, disease will spread, and Palestinian civilians, most of them children, will continue to suffer and many die.
because Israel's security situation will worsen if we don't do the humanitarian aid. We need to support our national priorities around the world. Our service members are working nonstop to defend commercial shipping routes and deter broader regional conflicts with Iran. They deserve our support. We must provide additional security assistance to Ukraine. The situation there is desperate, Mr. Speaker. Ukrainian civilians will continue to be murdered. Their military faces serious shortage of ammunition, and we must remedy that. Congress cannot afford to ignore any of these challenges because America cannot afford to ignore them. We must lead, and the Republican majority, in my opinion, is failing to do just that. If we fail here, the national security consequences we will face abroad are: we will leave both Israel and U.S. troops in the Middle East in a more dangerous position when it comes to Iranian activities. We will condemn more Palestinian civilians in Gaza to die. And we will doom the Ukrainian people to face a dark future with their democratic aspirations crushed by Putin's boot. And we will leave our European allies, who have just approved a 50 billion euro package for Ukraine, to face a resurgent Russian military on their borders. The majority has left us no choice but to vote no.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. The bill before us today is regarding Israel. We have time to debate Ukraine at a later date, but today this is regarding aid to Israel, which we need to do immediately. With that, I yield to the gentleman from Arkansas, member of the Defense Appropriations Committee and chairman of the Financial Services Committee, Mr. Womack. 2 minutes.
For how long? The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank my friend, Chairman Calvert, for giving me an opportunity to speak on this very vital piece of legislation. It is our solemn duty, Mr. Speaker, our solemn duty to protect our allies and defeat our common enemies. I think we have agreement on both sides of the aisle that we need to do that. October 7th, 2023, Hamas launched a brutal attack on our friends in Israel, and we've all seen the carnage and the assessment of damage and the terrific loss of life in Israel. This unwarranted and unprovoked attack was a cruel display of the worst of humanity. We should all agree to that. Israel is a stabilizing force in the Middle East. It has to be supported at all costs. From my time as a commander of forces in the Sinai Peninsula, where I had a close working relationship with the IDF, to my time as a member of Congress in this important subcommittee, I've always been a strong supporter of Israel and will continue to advocate on its behalf. This $17.6 billion appropriated will save Israeli lives. It'll work to defeat Hamas terrorists. The funding will replenish and procure advanced weapon systems, defense articles, and defense services, provide for the procurement of the Iron Dome, David Sling, and Iron Beam defense systems to combat short-range rockets and support U.S. military operations in Israel. In short, Mr. Speaker, we need to pass this bill. And so I encourage all of my colleagues to take a serious look at it. Pass the bill. Let's get it to the Senate, get it to the White House. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California reserved. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, the ranking member of the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, Ms. Watson.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support Israel's absolute right to exist, to defend itself, and to bring home its citizens and ours who are still held captive after 122 days. Over those 122 days, President Biden has firmly backed Israel's response to genocidal Hamas terror. He helped free over 100 hostages and continues working tirelessly to bring them all home. And he has forcefully countered malign forces who attack our troops and oppose any future peace. Meanwhile, for 122 days, Republicans have ignored President Biden's urgent request: safeguard our democracy and our allies from adversaries who seek chaos, death, and destruction. This abdication of responsibility fails our constituents, our allies, and our national security interests. After months of waiting, I won't hesitate to vote for Israel's defense in this moment of crisis. But I'm enraged that Republicans are playing political games, caving to Trump and the extreme fringe of their party at the expense of our most sacred national obligations. They cynically pound the table about Iran, but they're suddenly blind to Putin's wrath in Ukraine and deaf to Xi's threats against Taiwan. They callously disregard the humanitarian tragedy facing Gazans, who are also victims of Hamas, eroding our credibility and undermining future prospects for a just and lasting peace. And I'm appalled that after 3,300 anti-Semitic attacks in this country in just 3 months, they will pass a dozen non-binding resolutions only to turn around and defund basic protections for Jewish Americans. We could have passed the president's emergency request months ago in a massive bipartisan show of strength. But instead, Republicans are needlessly weaponizing these vital efforts to score cheap political points. It took far too long to get here, yet this bill still falls short of our needs. As a Jew, as a proud Zionist, my conscience demands that I vote with Israel in her hour of need in this moment of crisis. But I won't pretend that this bill comes close to meeting our security needs. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
I thank the Speaker. I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina, Dr. Murphy, 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I rise in support of 7217, the Israel Security Supplementals Appropriations Act. In the face of terror and absolute unprovoked aggression, Israel is in the fight for its existence. The United States must not shirk its duty and must support Israel. Israel has the absolute right to exist. Mr. Speaker, the world is essentially on fire. If you do not combat dictators, if you do not combat terrorists, we are shirking our duty. So today, now, with the United States being Israel's greatest ally, we must support them. We already sent the Senate a support bill. We sent them a support bill for Israel. We did that barely a month after the Hamas attack on October the 7th. But what has Senator Schumer and Senator Democrats done? They've sat on it. And now they want to send us a bill to try to fix their crisis at the border, and guise that with support of Israel. By the way, their crisis at the border, President Biden's crisis at the border, has cost this nation $450 billion. That pales in comparison to the $17 billion that we are asking for Israel. We don't need gimmicks. We don't need a bill that hasn't even been passed by the Senate, which will allow more and more and more illegals to come into this country. What we need is a singular bill to support Israel, our greatest ally. With that, I ask my colleagues to support H.R. 7217. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, a member of the Appropriations Committee, Ms. Frankel.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this bill for emergency funding for Israel and for U.S. military operations in the Middle East. On October 7, 2023, Hamas terrorists brutally attacked Israel, murdering, maiming, and raping innocent women, men, and children, taking 240 hostages, many who remain in dark tunnels, being starved and abused. And adding fuel to the fire, Iran proxies are shooting rockets into Israel, jeopardizing commerce in the Red Sea, and killing American soldiers on military bases. Funds from this bill will enable Israel to defend itself and the U.S. to protect our own military personnel. Mr. Speaker, I recognize and I respect the concern of friends who support Israel but want other issues also important to be addressed. But, Mr. Speaker, the perfect should not be the enemy of the good. And let me be clear, my vote will be for what is in this proposed bill and not a rebuke of what is left out. I fear that a divided Congress will embolden Israel's adversaries and put our own military in harm's way. Israel's security is our security. I stand with Israel, I stand with humanity, and I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this bill. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler, 3 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today I rise to show my strong support for this aid package that will support our closest ally, Israel. Providing much-needed assistance for Israel and for U.S. forces in the Middle East region reaffirms our unwavering commitment to democracy, security, and peace in the Middle East. This is a funding package that will enhance Israel's defense capabilities, specifically in the area of missile and rocket defense, with significant allocations for the Iron Dome and David Sling systems, and the innovative Iron Beam system designed to counteract shorter-range threats. All of these are made even more necessary due to Iran's investment in weapons for terrorists around the region, including Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and others. And these groups are expanding their attacks on U.S. troops. This aid package should transcend partisan lines. It is about more than supporting Israel's right to defend itself. It is about securing our strategic interests and showing support for our closest ally, Israel. That's why I was shocked to see that President Biden swore to veto this legislation, which provides our ally Israel with essential aid. There are no policy riders or poison pills. It is a clean bill supporting the state of Israel. This should not be political, and it shouldn't be that complicated. Yet, for whatever reason, Joe Biden has indicated he would veto this bill, and House and Senate Democrats are falling all over themselves to oppose it. It has been 122 days since the terrorist attack of October 7th. The House passed an aid package months ago. The Senate did not act. And according to reports, the Senate may not even have the votes tomorrow to pass their supplemental bill. Therefore, this may end up being the only bill in town. And I just can't understand why my Democratic colleagues, whether you think it's political or not, vote yes. What are you, crazy? I just don't even understand the logic. It's a clean bill. Vote yes. Even ultimately, if the Senate does pass their bill and it does come here, then we'll deal with that. But why would you ever want to be on the record on a clean bill opposing aid to the state of Israel? It's foolish. It's my sincere hope that all of my colleagues will find the moral courage to support this funding package and support Israel in her time of need while providing critical resources to our troops overseas. A little common sense here. Vote yes. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Members are reminded to direct their remarks to the chair. Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Connecticut, the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Himes.
Gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank Ms. DeLauro, and maybe I can help my confused friend from New York so that he might understand what is at stake here and why Democrats are going to vote no. I stand here with some trepidation because for a decade and a half, I have stood here and proudly voted to support Israel, and Israel has been attacked, and I know that we will pass Israel aid. But make no mistake, what we're seeing today is a profoundly cynical political maneuver. And for my friend from New York, let me explain it. Mr. Calvert, Ms. DeLauro, and I were in the White House when the Speaker, all of 2 days the Speaker of the House, looked at the National Security Advisor and said, we will do border first, Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. He demanded that. The White House said, no, we shouldn't bind those things up because that creates the possibility that we don't get any of that done. And then we make very real progress. We have a bipartisan package which does all of those things. It counters Putin's murderousness in Ukraine. It supports Taiwan. It stands with Israel. It provides humanitarian aid. And it offers a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do a border and immigration deal. An immigration deal that the Border Patrol Union has endorsed. My Republican colleagues trot out the Border Patrol every day and say, look at these poor guys. The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. This should pass. It's a historic opportunity to stand for what we believe as Americans. But then something happened. Donald Trump called. Donald Trump called the Speaker. The Speaker said it. And he said, we know how he feels about Ukraine. And he said, don't do the border deal. A border deal negotiated with one of the most conservative senators in the United States Senate, Mr. Calvert, Ms. DeLauro, and I heard Mitch McConnell say, this is a better deal than we get if Donald Trump is president and we have the House and the Senate. But Donald Trump called. I need to put another name out there. Neville Chamberlain, 1938, peace for our time, because he kowtowed to a dictator. That is what is at stake. We will hang the legacy of Neville Chamberlain around our necks if we don't seize this historic opportunity to do a comprehensive security bill and reject this political, cynical maneuver. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserved. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank the Speaker. The House was excluded from all negotiations regarding the Senate supplemental. And today we're talking about assistance to Israel that's needed immediately. I yield to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Rouser, 1.5 minutes.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill authored by my good friend from California, Ken Calvert. This legislation provides additional security assistance to ensure Israel, our greatest Middle Eastern ally, survives the most significant threats to its existence to date. The Jewish people are confronting the unspeakable evil of Hamas, which perpetrated a callous, barbaric attack against the state of Israel and continues to hold more than 132 people hostage in Gaza, including fellow Americans. Israel needs our support to ensure they can win this war and bring every hostage home, as well as counter the other threats to their national security. This bill reaffirms the United States' strong commitment to supporting the people of Israel by providing critical funding to reinforce Israeli defense system and does so without compromising our own readiness. In addition, it ensures our ability to protect U.S. citizens and personnel in Israel. We cannot and must not turn our back on our ally. Doing so would only embolden Hamas, incentivize Iran to continue funding ruthless attacks on Israel, and weaken the security of American personnel in the region, not to mention the harm it would eventually bring to our own nation here at home. We either ensure that Israel has the resources to win, or we are eventually forced to fight the same enemies here. For those who want to annihilate Israel wish to do the same to America. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time.
Gentleman from California reserved. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, Israel is fighting an existential war against Hamas, a death cult dedicated to the genocide of Jews and the annihilation of the Jewish state, while also being attacked by Hezbollah, the IRGC and Iranian proxies, and Houthis. There is no question that the United States must support our ally Israel. But to my colleagues, I say it is folly to think that what is happening now in the Middle East is not connected to what is happening concurrently in Ukraine. If Ukraine falls, the aid we're providing Israel in this bill is only going to be a small down payment to what will be needed when Israel faces a strengthened Hezbollah backed by an emboldened Iran, encouraged by a newly empowered Russia. And the United States will likely need to spend billions of additional dollars stationing more U.S. troops alongside our NATO allies in Europe. We are selling ourselves and our allies short by not taking the responsibility of leadership this country should be taking. And if we don't continue, it's going to cost our kids and our kids' future. It is shameful that the Republicans and Speaker Johnson are using our most important ally, Israel, as a political cudgel. It threatens not only Israel's security, but America's security and our children's future. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I'm pleased to recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Van Orden, for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd remind my colleague that, in fact, I agree with him for one time. These events are connected, and the connection is the incredibly strategic amount of strategic weakness the Biden administration has shown. That's why Putin invaded Ukraine, and that's why Hamas has gone crazy in Israel. Immediately following the attacks of October 7th, I went to Israel and I witnessed what Hamas did to the Jewish people. And as a retired Navy SEAL combat medic, it put me on my heels. And I will remind my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that there was a ceasefire on October 6th, that there was a de facto two-state solution on October 6th, and that was broken by Hamas. And unlike the vast majority of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I spent my entire adult life either training for, training others for, or at war myself. So there is a difference between the conflict in Ukraine and what's taking place in Israel right now. Vladimir Putin is a war criminal, and he is after territorial gains. Hamas is a group of savages that are after the utter destruction of the Jews as a people. They want to eradicate them. And there are members of the other party who have been censured, member of the other party that's been censured on this floor for grossly anti-Semitic remarks, and that's what's taking place. Do not be fooled by this political rhetoric. I stand with the Jewish people now. I will stand with them from the beginning to the end, so the river to the sea never takes place. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Khanna.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will vote no today on the $17 billion aid package, which provides a blank check to Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and the extreme right-wing government in Israel. How dare Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security minister, have the gall to criticize America while calling for the mass expulsion of Palestinians? I will vote no because this bill includes zero humanitarian aid while children are dying and 400,000 Gazans face famine. I will vote no because this bill undermines human rights and international law, ignoring the recent ICJ decision calling on Israel to do more to protect Palestinian civilians. I will vote no because it is painfully obvious to the entire world that what is needed today is a permanent ceasefire and a release of all hostages. There come moments in a nation's history when our actions reveal our values. This is such a moment. We must stand for stopping the bombing, for ending this brutal war, and for justice in the Middle East, with a Palestinian state with equal rights living side by side with Israel.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. From Connecticut is recognized.
Sorry. I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I thank the chair. Mr. Speaker, more than 1,200 Israelis were killed on October 7th, and 136 remain hostage. In response, 27,478 Palestinians have been killed, 70% of whom are women and children. And most Gazans today cannot reach a fully functioning hospital. This is not war. This is slaughter. And yet, after all this destruction and devastation, the Netanyahu government is still nowhere close to their stated objective of destroying Hamas. Moreover, the United States has our own requirements outlining the transfer of weapons to forces engaged in gross human rights violations. We have a responsibility to honor those laws, to facilitate a bilateral ceasefire, to move to end this campaign of mass casualty and loss of life that risks bringing the entire region closer to a wider, deadlier conflict. This bill contains $17 billion on top of the billions we already transfer every year with no conditions and no humanitarian aid for the most vulnerable. Everyday Americans should not tolerate this squandering of our resources without oversight on such an inhumane and ineffective operation, especially when we are living paycheck to paycheck and they cannot see their Congress address their most basic material concerns. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Here we go again, sending $17.6 billion U.S. tax dollars with no conditions attached to Netanyahu's extremist government to drop more bombs on innocent Palestinians. The Israeli government has already killed 27,000 people. 11,500 of them were children. I'm tired of my colleagues coming to me whispering, I don't really like Netanyahu. Well, then why are we sending him billions of dollars with no conditions? He literally is telling us over and over again what his intention is. I'm tired of my colleagues coming and whispering to me, Rashida, I support two-state solution. Great. Then send money that conditions for a two-state solution, because Netanyahu has over and over again told us he never wants to see a Palestinian state. So I'm tired. I oppose Netanyahu's war crimes and want him gone too. But many of my colleagues that continue to tell me that do not want to condition the aid. They give it to a genocidal maniac. My message to my colleagues is simple. If you don't support Netanyahu, if you're disgusted by the countless videos of lifeless children pulled out of the rubble, if you actually believe in upholding human rights and international law, vote no on a blank check to Netanyahu's genocide.
Gentlelady's time's expired.
Thank you.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves. Gentleman from California is recognized.
I would say the folks that believe in genocide is Hamas. I yield to the gentleman from Florida, the chairman of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, Mr. Diaz-Balart, 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Let me first thank the gentleman from California, Chairman Calvert, for his leadership in drafting this critical bill, along with the Chairwoman Kay Granger, and the leadership for bringing this forward. As Mr. Calvert just said, yes, there has been genocide, but the genocide has been from Hamas, And if the world needed yet another reminder of the importance of Israel as a safe haven for the Jewish people, then the attacks of October 7th should be that wake-up call. This is not that complicated. I've been disgusted and shocked by some of the things that we've been hearing, including the sheer glee and displayed in celebrations across, even in this country, because of the murders of October. And remember, those grotesque celebrations and demonstrations happened before Israel even began its military action to defend Israelis, again in Gaza. So let's be clear. Those demonstrations, those statements, those celebrations were and are in favor of the terrorist group Hamas. The despicable anti-Semitism, which has been dramatically increased since October 7th, that we've even seen here sometimes on this floor, has to be condemned and has to stop. Israel is on the front line in the battle against terrorism. The terrorism of Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, you name it, and all of those, they continue to await for an opportunity to strike at Israel, as they have, just like they want to strike here to the American people in the United States. Israel and the United States do not want violence. But the problem is that the terrorists do, and they are the ones who have killed and butchered and maimed innocent Israelis. Again, last November, the House passed another Israel security supplemental, which was fully offset by a rescission of the IRS funding, and that was the reason why the White House claimed that they opposed that bill. Well, now there are zero excuses to oppose this bill. This bill does one thing, Mr. Speaker. It provides urgently needed funding for our friend and ally Israel to defeat the terrorists that they are dealing with. The United States must stand with Israel and to eradicate terrorism. This is not that complicated. You can use every excuse in the world and again with the purpose of supporting Hamas and justifying the murders. This bill stands with Israel. No ifs, no ands, no buts. I'm grateful to Chairman Calvert for bringing this important piece of legislation, and I wholeheartedly support it. I yield back.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, the distinguished ranking member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, Ms. Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the gentlelady for yielding and for her strong leadership. Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose H.R. 7217. The United States and the world are facing a very dangerous time, with the risk of being pulled deeper and deeper into conflicts across the globe. Meanwhile, millions of people around the world are facing violence, dislocation, and hunger. This bill really is not a serious effort. As the ranking member of the State and Foreign Operations Subcommittee, I cannot support a bill that fails to meet the challenges of this moment and abandons those most in need of humanitarian assistance. And yes, this bill undermines the United States policy which supports a two-state solution. This bill is a blatant political stunt that is dead on arrival in the Senate. And so I urge my colleagues to oppose it. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from Connecticut reserves.
Yes.
Gentleman from California is recognized.
May I inquire how much time is left? Both sides.
Gentleman from California has 30 seconds. Gentlelady from Connecticut has 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, who has the right to close?
Reserve the right to close. Gentlelady from Connecticut.
Yes,
reserve.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from California reserves. Gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Okay, thank you. A short while ago, my colleague from Arkansas said it is our solemn duty to protect our allies. Indeed, it is our solemn duty to protect our allies. Our allies in this case are Israel, yes, and we support Israel. Our ally is Ukraine, and we need to continue to support Ukraine. Our ally is Taiwan, and we need to support Taiwan. We have a solemn duty, yes, to provide humanitarian assistance to innocent civilians. We have a solemn duty to protect our border. These are not the issues that are part of this bill. This bill does not meet those solemn obligations. My Republican colleagues do not want to help Ukraine or the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. They do not want to address border security. They talked about border security as being the key to opening up the door to foreign assistance. They said it in the White House. The Speaker did that and now has walked away from it. It is really a political sham. They do not want to promote humanitarian assistance and leave millions of innocent civilians without food, shelter, clothing. In a conversation with the director of the World Food Organization, Cynthia McCain, she said, and I asked about Gaza, she said to me, Rosa, these people are starving. It is a famine. And I believe that is as well in this process of providing assistance to just Israel and not our other allies, they do hurt Israel and isolate Israel. It is time for my colleagues to be able to, on the other side of the aisle, to put our country and our national security ahead of partisan politics. What we should do is to vote this bill down. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut yields. Gentleman from California is recognized.
The gentlelady yields the balance of her time.
Yes, sir.
I'll close. The gentlelady is correct. This bill is not about Ukraine or Indo-PACOM or some other things that I would love to have some discussions about in the future. This is about Israel. And I think my friends on the other side of the aisle know I'm not a cynical person. I went about this, I've been in favor of moving an Israel bill for some time, and now is the time. I think it's just simply the right thing to do. And with that, let's pass this bill, let's support Israel, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Yields. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill H.R. 7217? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is...
Mr. Speaker,
purposes of the gentlelady from Connecticut.
I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Proceedings will resume on questions previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order. The motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1727 if ordered. Adoption of House Resolution 863 if ordered. And the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7217. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the question on suspending the rules and passing H.R. 1727 as amended, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar Number 297, H.R. 1727, a bill to amend the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal Development Act to extend the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal National Historical Park Commission.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. For what purposes the gentleman from California seek
Mr.
recognition?
Speaker, I demand the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote. On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 2, two-thirds being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of House Resolution 863 will now resume. The clerk will report the title.
House Calendar Number 60, House Resolution 863, Resolution impeaching Alejandro Nicholas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, for high crimes and misdemeanors.
The question is on the adoption of the resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed to.
Mr. Speaker,
on that, purposes, the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 214 and the nays are 216. The resolution is not adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from Utah seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Moore of Utah moves to reconsider the vote on adoption of House Resolution 863.
The question is on the motion to reconsider. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Utah.
Mr. Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and the nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the unfinished business is the vote on the motion to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 7217, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title.
H.R. 7217, a bill making emergency supplemental appropriations to respond to the attacks in Israel for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
On this vote, the yeas are 250, the nays are 180. Two-thirds not being in the affirmative, the rules are not suspended, and the bill is not passed. For what purposes, gentlemen from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Democratic Caucus, I offer a privileged resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 999. Resolved that the following named
I ask
members...
unanimous consent that the resolution be considered as read.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purposes the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of H-Con Res 84 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Concurrent Resolution 84. Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for a ceremony to present the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops and the 31333rd Signal Services Company, known collectively as the Ghost Army, in recognition of unique and highly distinguished service during World War II.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Is there objection to the consideration of the resolution? For what purposes does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on House Administration be discharged from further consideration of H-Con Res 85 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
Clerk will report the title of the resolution.
Concurrent Resolution 85. Concurrent resolution authorizing the use of Emancipation Hall in the Capitol Visitor Center for a ceremony to present the Congressional Gold Medal collectively to the women in the United States who joined the workforce during World War II, providing the aircraft, vehicles, weaponry, and ammunition and other materials who win the war, and who referred to as Rosie the Riveter, in recognition of their contributions to the United States and the inspiration they have provided to ensuing generations.
Is there objection to the consideration of the resolution? Without objection, the resolution is agreed to. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn to meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Without objection. Does the gentlelady from Delaware seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, as I ask unanimous consent that I may hereafter be considered as the first sponsor of H.R. 793, a bill originally introduced by Representative Bill Johnson of Ohio to strengthen the American workforce for the purposes of adding co-sponsors and requesting reprintings pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 12.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair will now entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. The House will be in order. Would you please take your conversations off the floor? Purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks, and the chamber is still not in order.
The chamber is still not in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Danny. Okay.
The House is not in order. Would you please take your conversations off the floor? Thank you. Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize Danny Kugler of Kersey, Pennsylvania, in Elk County. Danny currently serves as the City of St. Mary's Parks and Recreation Director and was recently recognized by Parks and Recreation magazine with the National Recreation and Parks Association 30 Under 30 award, young professionals leading the way in 2024. This award is given to young professionals who raise the bar for parks and recreation profession. Danny was selected from a poll of over 100 applicants and scored on the impact of the agency's community and service population, contributions to the professional development of the field of parks and recreation, and for innovative ideas, programs, or research in the field of parks and recreation. Danny was hired as the first year-round and full-time director in June of 2029. In her 5 years serving the St. Mary's area, she's established a strong social media presence and increased membership and program participation by 40%. She's also successfully increased the city's 15 summer-only program events to 45 year-round programs and events. This is the first time in St. Mary's history that its Parks Director has been recognized for this award. Congratulations, Danny, on this much-deserved recognition, and I look forward to seeing continued growth and development of St. Mary's Parks and Recreation Department. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. For what purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, listening to constituents is the most important thing we can do. They're telling me back home about the burden of high cost. One constituent shared, I have to continue working even after retirement. My husband cannot afford to retire due to rising costs. I also have to assist my mom with her bills, which puts further strain on our finances. Too many find it challenging to make ends meet while caring for an elderly parent. Another constituent shared, my income doesn't cover common life. I can't afford decent housing, meats at the grocery store, or basic life necessities. It's harder now. Madam Speaker, Congress must take every possible measure to ensure that residents of Eastern North Carolina, rural America, and those across America do not feel the financial strain in their pocketbooks and wallets. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate James W. Putney, Jr., a veteran, patriot, and Grand Marshal of the 2023 Savannah Veterans Day Parade. Mr. Putney proudly led the annual Veterans Day Parade in Savannah, which is dedicated to celebrating America's heroes. His devout service and leadership have been evident since answering the call to join the United States Army at 17 years old. Over 2 decades of honorable service resulted in his retirement as a staff sergeant at Fort Benning, Georgia. In his military journey, James played vital roles as a construction and combat engineer. Post-retirement, he returned to his roots in Savannah, transitioning to a career at the Chatham County Courthouse, where he continued his service until 2016. Even in retirement, James remained actively involved in various local organizations as he continues to exemplify dedication and leadership to his community and to his country. Congratulations, James. Thank you for your service to your country and to your community. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the Black women who won big at the 66th Annual Grammy Awards, which were held in the heart of my district. Best Album nominee SZA came away with awards for Best Progressive R&B Album, Best R&B Song, and Best Pop Duo Group Performance. Victoria Monet became the third woman in 4 years to take home the Grammy for Best New Artist, following Samara Joy, who won Best Jazz Performance this year, and Megan Thee Stallion. At the age of 22, Tyla became the youngest South African artist in history to win Best African Music Performance Award for her mega hit Water. And Coco Jones came away with Best R&B Performance. Still, the biggest awards, Best Album, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year, are seldom won by Black women. As Jay-Z alluded to, a Black woman has not won the top prize, Best Album, in 25 years. I mean, how much lemonade do we have to make? And with that, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise before the House tonight in support of the Israel Security Supplemental Appropriations Act. Israel has been our longtime ally, and they need us more than ever at this point. With the unwarranted, unprovoked attacks that happened on October 7 to many, many innocent people by the terrorist group Hamas and the others that they're surrounded by in their country. Israel's been under attack since the first moment of its existence in the 40s, but even going back millennia. Israel's a fantastic partner on developing new technologies, improved medical technologies, improved medicines, improved drip irrigation, and improved missile defense systems. They're a great partner with us, and indeed a shining beacon in the Middle East as a representative republic unlike any other there. Even Arab Israelis would rather live in Israel than in some of those other places because they know it's good there, they know it's right, they know it's just. It's our obligation. Indeed, it's our privilege to stand with Israel as an ally in their time of great need. So we need to get over ourselves a little bit around here and step forward and get this work done. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute and advise to extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in absolute disbelief and genuine disgust with what the Speaker did tonight. He knowingly allowed a bill to fail that would have provided critical support for our troops fighting terrorism in Iraq and Syria and critical support for Israel. He did it because he wanted to embarrass Democrats. He also intentionally left out much-needed humanitarian aid for Palestinians in Gaza, essential support for Ukraine, and essential support for Taiwan. He chose this horrific, dangerous new brand of partisan politics over our troops, our allies, and millions in need. The fact that Palestinians need humanitarian aid, Ukrainians need to defend itself against Putin, and Taiwan needs support against China is absolutely of no interest to the Speaker. Representative Goldman and I attempted to amend this bill to include aid for all three, but we were denied. We will keep fighting to fund Ukraine, Taiwan, and humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza. This is what the American people want. It's what our global partners need, and it's what this moment
time
requires
has expired.
Of us. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia? Okay. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise this evening to salute the long-storied career of Chief Bobby Hughes of the East Meadow Fire Department, who has been in the Nassau County Fire Service for over 40 years. He rose through the ranks, becoming Chief of Department from 1997 to 1998, instrumental in forming the East Meadow Fire Department Chiefs Association. He's the current band leader of the Nassau County Firefighters Pipes and Drums, who led that very band down Pennsylvania Avenue for the inauguration of President Trump. He joined the Nassau County Fire Service Academy as an instructor in 2003 and has risen through the ranks. And this week, he will walk out of the Nassau County Fire Service Academy for the last time as the chief instructor. He has made it a beacon of education and training, not just in Nassau County, but across the country. Madam Speaker, I join the Nassau County Fire Service in saluting Chief Bobby Hughes and thanking him for his career in keeping our county safe and training the future of the fire service. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to the ultimate sacrifice made by 5 of our nation's most heroic men and women in uniform. Each was defending liberty in dangerous territory, and each possessed raw courage, selflessness, and total dedication to duty for the sake of our nation. Each of us is privileged to live under liberty's umbrella because of them. Special Warfare Operator First Class Christopher Chambers and Navy Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram were lost far from home in rough waters on the Red Sea on January 11th. Then 17 days later, on January 28th, an enemy drone targeted Tower 22 in Jordan. The drone, operated by Iranian-backed militia terrorists, wounded more than 40 U.S. service members, killing 3 of America's finest, Staff Sergeant William Rivers, Sergeant Kennedy Sanders, and Sergeant Brianna Moffitt. While all 5 hailed from different hometowns, they served together for one united purpose: liberty, defending America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. These brave soldiers and sailors were guarding us against the hastening spiderweb of terrorism and tyranny halfway around the world. Let us pay homage and honor each of these young men and women for their ultimate sacrifice. May they rest in peace. May God bless America.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
For 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The skullduggery of the Speaker of the House was on display today. He has no real interest in helping Israel. He has interest in scoring political points with Donald Trump. And he used Israel to do that today, and he did it a month ago. A month ago or so, he said he would support aid to Israel if it was set off with $13 or $14 million in cuts to the IRS, which would have only benefited the wealthiest tax cheats in our country. To condition aid for Israel on helping out rich tax cheats is despicable. And the skullduggery today was to separate Israel from Ukraine, a country similar to Israel that's being invaded by Russia, to try to deny its territorial integrity and to commit a genocide, just as Hamas is trying to commit a genocide in Israel. I support Israel. I also support helping with humanitarian aid the people in Gaza who have been hurt, injured, or killed. I also support helping Ukraine from having Russia do the same thing. And I support Taiwan. I do not support the Speaker. He is a man without good faith. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Washington seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in praise of the resilience of my community in Southwest Washington. Last month, a fire broke out of one of 2 seafood processing facilities near the Port of Ilwaco in my district. In the aftermath of the catastrophic fire, the unity and support demonstrated by the Ilwaco community has been remarkable. Whereas lesser men would have seen an opportunity for competitive advantage, these folks chose to stand together and see each other as neighbors, lending out crab pots to each other that they didn't have to do. I am incredibly grateful to come from a community that supports each other in the wake of a tragedy. Their community spirit is a competitive advantage that money cannot buy and in natural disasters cannot shake. I extend my thanks to the brave first responders who responded to the fire. Several of them were treated for heat exhaustion, to their tireless effort in combating the blaze for hours. And I want to recognize the folks in Owaco who stepped up to help local crabbers, dropping off sandwiches, shipping up crab pots from as far south as California and Alaska. And rebuilding and recovery will take time. They will never get back those hours of sleep or the heartache or the monetary loss. But their moral fiber has been revealed in a way that is durable and will strengthen the community and is its own reward. I stand with you in your fights, and I am so grateful for your leadership. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
The American people might wonder just what happened here today. Well, first of all, the southern border deal never got anywhere. And all of the logistics and all of the cloak and dagger and what was going to be in it failed to even get the attention of the Speaker of this House or any of the Republican members. And yet, all of a sudden, an unfounded legislative initiative that was allegedly to advocate for the needs of the people in the Mideast wound up on the floor of the House. You wonder what we did today. It wound up on the floor of the House with no conscience, no thought, no commitment. And that is why I was not able to vote for it. I was willing to join an amended initiative to ensure that all of the people that are in need in the Mideast would be taken care of, that we would have the funding for Israel, but we would have the funding for the Palestinians and the aid that is needed in Gaza and the ability to deal with the crisis of death that they have been facing, that we would have the money for Taiwan, and yes, that we would have the money for Ukraine. I've been to the border of Ukraine. I've seen the violence against our children. I've seen Russia steal children. I've seen parents die in the streets. It is necessary that we do this right, and that is funding for all of those that are in need, and do it now.
The
Speaker
gentlewoman's
of the
time
House
has
needs
expired.
to treat this in a professional way for the American people to know we care about the nation
gentlewoman's
and
time
care
has
about the
expired.
Mideast. I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th, 2023, the gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulniers, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous